You do like Hazara?
That's it. No, you're good. Thank you.
So I would like to share with you the story of why my family lights an extra ner, an extra candle, an extra wick on Hanukkah. So like I said, by the time we're up to the 8th night, we're not lighting 8 plus 1, we're lighting 9 plus 1. 8 for the mitzvah, plus the shamash, plus 1 specifically that my family lights. So this is from a book, Aleppo Tales, from Rabbi Sabato. This is a fictional story, but it reflects the custom as I had heard it, I had understood it. This custom has been vouched for by my father, who saw his late father following this practice. And to this very day, in the Aram Soba community of New York, as I experienced, myself, Rabbi Laniado, I have seen many doing this and not knowing why. I have heard it said that this tradition was instituted by exiles from Spain who arrived in Aleppo at Hanukkah time, and that were saved from shipwreck by a miracle, and add an extra candle in memory of that miracle. This is one of the reasons that's given. There are numerous reasons given of why this is a special tradition. All of the ones that I heard and that I found in my personal research was that this is specifically from families who had come from Spain. The Spanish community, the Jewish Spanish community, is one that goes way, way, way back. It goes back 1,800 years. 1,800 years the Spanish community goes back. We actually found gravestones in Spain dating back to the year 200. And that's where my family originated. At the Golden Age, and there were ups and downs in Spain, it produced some of the greatest minds, doctors, astronomers, financiers, poets, and philosophers in the world at the time, including many of those who you're familiar with. Rabbi Yehuda HaLevi, Rambam, Maimonides, all from Spain. They were at the highest level of government. But in 1492, none of that mattered. Not their long history, not their friendship, not their support, and even their amassed fortunes. Like the story is told that Daniel Hakabar Banel offered the king a fortune, an incredible amount of money to save the Jews, but it did not work. And what happened was the Jewish community of about 200,000 who decided not to convert to Christianity, to Catholicism, 200,000 who were living at that time, there for over 1,000 years, amassing all fortunes, well-developed, integrated to society, lost everything. All of their property was confiscated, and they were forced to flee. My family fled early. We sensed the change in the tide, and we left for Portugal, eventually possibly Turkey or Italy, and eventually landed in Spain. You're talking now the 16th century, 15th century. Rabbi Abraham Laniado was the son of my ancestor who left from the Spanish Inquisition. Rabbi Abraham Laniado arrived in Aleppo, Syria, but soon he went to Yerushalayim. Then he went to Safed. And he had a son, Shemuel. Shemuel had the great opportunity of studying with Rabbi Yosef Karo. Anybody hear of the Shulchan Aruch? I wish I had more hands up. Okay. So my ancestor who studied Safed, studied with Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Moshe Cordovera, Rabbi Moshe Ashich, Rabbi Chaim Vital, and others. And he really developed within his studies. So around the year 1570, the community of Aleppo, known as the City of Scholars, a community which had some internal struggles between the new immigrants that came from Spain, like my family, the Laniado family, and those who were already in Spain, known as the Musta'arabim, those who were there dating all the way back, they say to, how far back do you think it goes, the community in Syria, Aleppo, Syria, Aram Sova, to the time of David HaMelech, even way before even the Spanish community. And so that community reached out to Rabbi Yosef Karo and said, we need a leader to help to deal with the two various factions of this community. We need somebody to lead us. And so the legend goes that the letter came back, and this is recorded in many places. Rabbi Yosef Karo said, and he wrote, I will send you ish asher kamoni. I'm going to send you somebody who is of my stature. And so Rabbi Yosef Karo sent Rabbi Meyer Laniado to be the chief rabbi of the Aleppo Jewish community in the 16th century. And my family continued to flourish there in Aleppo. We're chief rabbis for 6 or 7 generations through the 19th century, but also we're businessmen, craftsmen. The community of Aleppo, Syria also had its ups and downs, but it really was a center of Jewish scholarship and was the destination for the grandchildren of Maimonides. Everybody here heard of Maimonides, right? Yeah, not enough hands. Okay. The grandchildren of Maimonides went to Syria, brought the Aleppo Codex. Hopefully one day we could talk about that. And there were 22 functioning Batei Kenesiot, 22 shuls in this small country of Syria. In 1934, there were 30,000 Jews in Syria. But again, the tide changed. And in 1948, only 5,000 were left. It maintained around 5,000 for quite some time until 1992. What happened was that on November 29th, 1947, when the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution to partition Palestine and establish a Jewish state, riots by the Arabs erupted. And they burnt over 20 of those synagogues. And you'll see some of that in the upcoming video. Known as the Black Day in Halab. Arabs shouted death to the Jews and used mob violence to riot and burn Jewish synagogues and buildings. It was a very difficult situation for Jews, and again, always with its ups and downs. We have the opportunity today to learn a little bit more about this, and also to hear from somebody who was there, who later in history, from 1988 or so, helped get the rest of the 5,000 or so Jews, I think you're able to bring 4,000 out, 4,000 of the 5,000 Jews out of Syria, while they're in a very difficult situation of being under the watch of the secret police. And it was, again, a very, very difficult situation. So really today, November 30th, is a day that's been marked on our calendars. It's really a new day from 2015 that Israel has said, we need to remember what happened. We need to remember the beginning of the end of these communities, not only in Syria, but also in Iraq, also within Iran, and all of these Arab countries where we had Jewish communities for centuries. Okay, video. We're going to watch a video now, a little bit more about what happened on that tragic day. But all these great relationships. I mean, my great-grandfather told me stories like his. We had a good relationship with the Muslims at the time, but this kind of shifted that. You'll see. Volume.
On November 29, 1947, the United Nations announced the partition of Palestine, dividing the territory into 2 states, one Jewish and one Arab. Outraged, the Arab delegates stormed out of the assembly in protest. In Syria, Muslim leaders called for a holy war, saying it was a matter of life or death for the Arabs.
When the partition plan was voted on in the UN, for Arabs, it was a tragic moment. They saw this as a catastrophe, and they were intent then on finding any possible way to abort the creation of a Jewish state on land that they believed to be Arab. So emotions were very high.
I knew this was important for the Jewish people, Jewish nation. The United Nations finally came through and they voted for partition, and we were completely happy. Everybody that I knew was very happy. That was November 29. The next day also we were happy, but I will tell you that the day after that, December 1st, was a black day for us in Halab.
I was 14 and a half years old. We were having coffee and socializing with our neighbors. He says, I came here to warn you. Tomorrow, I don't want anybody to go out from his house. He says, stay in your house, don't move.
We had a Jewish neighbor. He worked in the government. He knew that something is going to happen. And at night, at 1 o'clock, we heard them going down. They left to Lebanon.
8, 9 years old, by that time, I noticed myself that on every home, there was signs written in charcoal. They would write, here resides the Dweck family. Hana bet Dweck, Hana bet Menashe, Hana heke. And I kept saying, why is every Jewish house marked?
On Monday, December 1st, demonstrations against the partition plan began.
In 47, I was 4 years old. It was a very traumatic day that nobody can ever forget. My father came and said, we have to barricade the doors.
It started in the Sultani school, which are all students. But after an hour, a lot of outsiders joined. Muslim, Christian, all of them joined together and start burning the Jewish stores, and they start looting. And the police, they stand by, they didn't do anything.
I was very young. I was like 8 years old, and we were looking from the window. We saw a lot of young men, crazy, shouting down the streets, and we got very scared.
They were all over every street. People were holding tools and pushing carriage that carried gasoline, and they wanted to burn, they want to destroy the Jewish community in Halab as punishment for what the Jews are getting.
They're looking for any Jew to hurt us, but we were hiding. So we had a big door. We made sure we put stones and wood behind it so that they do not push it through and come in to kill us.
They went into each house taking out carpets, beautiful carpets. They would take them, they would steal, they were stealing.
Our house was on a conspicuous spot on one of the main streets of town. And of course, we can't hide the fact that it was a Jewish home. So the mob started to burn it. My family were able, fortunately, to get out from the side door and run away from the house.
All the people of the courtyard that lived with us and some other houses next door, they came to my father for help. And he decided that we should go up to the roof, and we started jumping from one roof to another to go to a safe place. My father would take a person, throw him down, and my brother would catch him downstairs. All the neighbors go, and I was standing and watching all this, and then I told my father, you're gonna leave me here? You're not gonna take me? He saved everybody else, and then he took his family. This is the kind of person that my father was.
We was hiding in the house when they came like animal. We closed the door, and we see a little child bringing piece of the Sefer Torah. We said, finish, they went to the shul. It must be they broke into the shul, and those kids, they was playing with a piece of Sefer Torah paper. Every time that we look on the window, I say, we're gone. They're going to kill us.
My mother was very nervous. She was pressing clothing, and she said, the only thing I can do is if they barge in, I gotta get a few of them with my iron just before we die.
Many Arabs, horrified by the violence, protected their Jewish neighbors.
As they were passing our house, all our neighbors, the Muslim, were standing in front, saying in Arabic, no, this is our house. We live here, Muslim, keep on going. They were very good to us.
A bunch of men brandishing knives came to the door saying, this man is a Zionist and he has girls and we have to kill him. One of our Arab friends went out and told them, this is not a Jewish house, it's an Arab house, please go home.
We had a friend, an Armenian, that had a room for us in the basement of his house. He was afraid that if anybody sees that he's hiding Jews, they kill him. And we, as kids, wanted to make sure that we don't make any noise, we don't get out of the house. And we stayed there for 7 days.
4 or 5 synagogues that were burned were right in the neighborhood. So I remember that we went to the roof and we see the fire going to the sky of the shuls.
During the fire, we were home, and my whole family were watching how they start breaking the metal door of the Silvera synagogue, and they pouring gas and start burning it. I saw what he felt when he saw it, that when it will start burning. I mean, because he built it himself.
All day, the mob ransacked synagogues, including the synagogue of Gemeliyah.
My parents lived right next door to the synagogue, and they were looking at the mob storming that whole neighborhood, screaming and chanting, death to the Jews, or the Jews are our dogs. The mob was trying to climb over the wall into the synagogue. My mother tells me that the police helped several people of the mob to climb over the wall.
On the left-hand side of our house, there is an alley that goes to the shul, and that's where they were. At that time, the chief rabbi was over there. He goes very early in the morning to shul. Hacham Hussein Mizrahi. He was close to 90 years old.
The chief rabbi was reading in the shul. The Arabs arrived to the synagogue. They tell him, we're going to burn the shul. Get up and leave. He told them, burn the shul. I'm not moving.
They told him no. They carried him and they took him out of the shul. And they burned over 150 Sefer Torot.
They broke the glass. They took books and Sefarim, Seferet Torah, the scrolls, spread them all over the patio. They threw gasoline and they torched the place.
And this was only the beginning. The partition of Palestine sparked anti-Jewish riots throughout the Arab world.
Every single Jew thought about leaving. It was unbelievable. Like a big tree that they shook, and all the birds, they went all over the world. Brazil, Mexico, Panama. We gathered from Halab, from Damascus, and from Beirut. So now, wherever you go in all the world, you see Middle Eastern Jewish people living in everywhere.
Our escape from Aleppo is the immediate result of the terrible attacks that were perpetrated against the Jews who did nothing. This is how it happened not only in Aleppo, throughout the Arab world. More than 850,000 Jews were thrown out, expelled, or escaped as a result of the anti-Jewish demonstrations, attacks against the Jews, from Casablanca in Morocco to Baghdad in Iraq. And in Aleppo is not an exception. We were part of the Jewish world among the Arabs. We had lived there for centuries. And when people speak about refugees, I say, I am one of the refugees.
This is a broader story of Jews in Arab lands who, after essentially when Israel was given the right to establish itself, fell under tremendous amounts of persecution. And there are two groups of refugees, right? We usually hear about one of them. We almost never hear about these Jewish refugees, who are both more in number, and the truth of the reason behind why a lot of this has emerged recently. If you're interested in looking at this up, I remember the initial conversations has to do with reparations. Because there was a conversation, we have to pay back the Palestinians for that which they had lost when they had to flee, when the Arab legions decided to come into attack, and they fled for their lives. So it was decided, you know, in this conversation, we have to also bring up the refugee situation of the Arab Jews, who were both more in number and 50% more in accumulated wealth and value in reparations. But I think our story is totally different as a refugee story, in a certain sense, which you're going to hear now from an incredible human being, Hazzan Dr. Zalta. Because what these Arab Jews were able to do was to restart their lives, to get back on their feet. And again, like my family back from the Spanish Inquisition, was able to reestablish itself in Syria, was able to reestablish itself here in New York, and continue the traditions that it had, the tradition dating all the way back from Spain. So too, the Syrian community still exists and still is extremely strong, because it reestablished itself in Brooklyn, New York, that you know. How many Syrians are part of this community? A lot, 60,000, 70, 80, 100,000. Nobody knows exactly. Incredible numbers, incredible strength. Way more than just 20 synagogues. Successful in Torah, mitzvot. I sent to Ruth Gaffney a video of 50 kids on a Sunday afternoon coming together for a youth program, chanting Pizmonim. We're still alive and well. The Argentinian Syrian community, the Brazilian Jewish community, the Mexican Syrian Jewish community, the Israeli Syrian Jewish community, strong and well and continuing to light. That's an incredible miracle. And that's more of the story that I think we need to be telling. Not only the tragedy of that awful day when they torched synagogues and burnt our Sifrei Torah and threatened our lives, but also that we were able to get back up on our feet. Dr. Zalta came to this country, fled to this country. Hopefully we have time to tell the story. Hopefully they'll give some extra time. Incredible story. We also have a video of it. Incredible story. He came to the story, didn't know English. I don't know if he's going to share this part, so I want to share it because I think it's incredible. He didn't know English. He goes to Yeshiva University. Now, he didn't have family here either. Didn't know anybody, really. So you're really figuring yourself out on multiple different levels, financially, socially, linguistically, culturally, even basic things, going to the bank. It's different in different countries. How do you handle the various situations? He tells me, how did you learn English? I hope I remember this correctly. He says that when he went to math class, I believe it was math class, right? He said, this is not a knock on YU. It's specifically talking to the good education that he received in Syria. He was ahead of his class. And what he had learned, I don't know if it was a year or 2 years back, and what he already knew from his Syrian education. But he sat in math class, he already knew the math. And all he had to do was transpose the English of the math, right, with the Arabic that he knew, because he already knew the equations, he already knew everything he was learning. So through what he was learning, he saw the English on the page, and he was able to figure it out over time and listening to those lectures. He eventually developed, establishing a beautiful family. Not only a Hazzan, he's a doctor. Again, came here, did not know the language, had zero connections, was a refugee. He became a radiologist, a physician, and a professor at Montefiore, at Einstein. Incredible. And without further ado, I invite Hazzan Dr. Zalta to tell his story.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rabbi. Thank you, Ramaz administration. I don't know everybody by name, but thank all of you for having me today. I know time is like passing fast, and I'll make it short. There's so much to talk about, but I'll focus on a few things. Yes, the riots did not start in 1948. It was on and off even before that, but since 48, the situation for the Jews in Syria transformed from just Jewish to a new label, Zionist. All Jews are Zionists. One of the catastrophes that happened in Damascus, that I spoke about Aleppo community, was on one Friday night, I don't remember exactly the date, a Friday night, they used to have a custom, all of the bar mitzvah kids of that year, they used to come to that Menashe synagogue, and they used to pray with their rabbi, their teacher, in Minchan Mariv, Minchan Arbi, and sing together Kabbalat Shabbat as part of the tradition. They used to encourage the young students to go up and participate in the tefillot throughout. And someone decided to throw 2 bombs into the synagogue. 12 kids died on the spot, all bar mitzvah kids in that year, and tens of others, adults as well as kids, were injured. It's a catastrophe that repeated itself again and again, different forms. This was not my childhood. This was my father's childhood. My childhood, I grew up in a small, tight community, a community that we were not allowed to mingle too much beyond our borders. And the borders have changed over time, 4 kilometers, about 2 miles radius at one point, to expand it a little further later on in the 80s. At any rate, I went to Jewish school just like you, Ben Maimoun, the only Jewish school in Damascus, up to the 9th grade. And after that, I went for the secondary school, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. We all had to go to a non-Jewish school and sit in classroom with other kids, Christians, Muslims, and so forth. Those were a little bit different years for us. It was formative years as a young kids aspiring for a brighter future. We had to go to school on Shabbat. We did not write or just attend. We had our own minyan early morning at 5 a.m. And then at 7 o'clock we went to school. It was not by choice. You had to, attend. We attended and we came back home to continue Shabbat. It was a half a day. At any rate, in 1982, like many other kids, my generations aspired for better future. And we all wanted to leave one way or another Syria. And it wasn't that easy. Many people before us, young and old, have attempted to escape through dangerous routes via Turkey or South Lebanon or west to Cyprus. And then from there, they made it into Syria, or some didn't make it at all. So we had the same idea. And our first attempt as youngsters, 1984, we were able to cross into Lebanon, but unfortunately, to make the story short, we were caught and sent back to Syria. It did not succeed. It took me a year and a half after that to find the right connections. And I used to work with my dad in the summertime as well as vacations, in addition to my studies as a graft silversmith, silver grafting. Damascus Jews were famous for that type of work, grafting silver on brass, very crafty, artistic type of work. And I had my own business venture on the side at age 14, starting age 14. So I had to work for almost 1 year to pay the bribes for someone to get me a passport, illegally, of course, under the table, I should say, to leave Syria. And that's how I started my new journey my new journey. And I arrived in the United States in 1986 to a brother of a friend that I didn't know who came, picked me up from the airport. And I started in Brooklyn, going to synagogues, getting to know the people. The community was very, very welcoming and instrumental in helping me stand on my feet and to learn a little bit of English and go on to my dream future at a time was to become a physician. And I had so many encouragement and discouragement along the way. People did not believe, like, what are you talking about? You have no family, you have no one here. You know, even American kids, you have to be the top 1% to get accepted into medical school. What about financially, what it was? But I obviously did not listen to that. And I went along a long road, ups and downs, starting with YU, college, until I was accepted to medical school, Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And I finished my medical degree, went on for residency, fellowship, and currently I'm one of the associate professors at Albert Einstein for clinical radiology. It's been a long road, many ups and downs, as I said, and my family came in 1993 with the rest of the Jews. It's a different topic. We, as I said, had the Jewish life in Syria. We continue the same life here. Hanukkah was a very big time for all of the kids. The school days were half days throughout the entire week for them, and everybody celebrated. We were allowed to practice our Judaism to some extent, of course, and we did like Hanukkah, where everyone celebrated well. If I have a message on this little short capsule for the young, all of you guys here, what I've learned through my experiences the past 30 years in the United States, a new country, new society, new life, there's one thing. If you want to do something, if you have a dream, if you have a goal to accomplish, you can accomplish it. You can accomplish anything you want as long as you keep your eye on the goal, work hard, and keep trying. You will accomplish it no matter what is the goal it is. That's what I've learned from my experiences. And with that, I will stop here. Thank you for listening.
We have just another 10 minutes to open up to any questions you guys would like to ask. You could ask questions about what was life like in Damascus? What was it like in school? What were foods like? What was it like with the secret police that are watching every single move that you make? Okay, so does anybody have a question?
Anybody? Of course. It was a mixture of feelings. On one hand, I'm very excited to start a new life on the stage. On the other hand, I was very nervous. I was terrified when I was on the planes, like, what am I doing? I mean, where am I gonna go? But I guess as a youngster also, now I can relate to that. We don't tend to think of the risks as much as we think of the potential positive things that you're about to accomplish. We don't think about it too much. It's like, let's do it, let's go. And yes, I was. And there were many days I struggled a lot. I almost stopped my education in the fourth year of my college. I wanted to switch. Yeah, go ahead. Whoever.
So it sounds like your father did it, like who gave you like the money for your education and where to go?
All right. So when I first came, I really came with $800 in my pocket. That money was borrowed. My father borrowed it to give it to me. And when I got here to the United States, of course, for all refugees, I applied as a refugee when I got here, political asylum. There are two Jewish organizations that are instrumental in helping Jews or refugees settle. One of them is called Hayas, and the other one called Nayana. And those two organizations helped us, all of the refugees, in terms of giving us some stipends to live on, and English classes in Nayana, which was not many, I mean, like an hour or 2 hours a day for about a few months. But that's how it started. The community in Brooklyn, when they saw me and they got to know me, they gave me jobs. They want as a source of income, and that's how I started. Later on in 1988, since I know how to lay in the Torah, read the Torah, so I took a job in Deal, New Jersey. I used to travel, every weekend to read the Torah for them every Shabbat. I did that for 3 years. So I'm from there, became a Hazzan of Fifth Avenue Synagogue in 1990. For 18 years I was there, and that was my main source of income. I worked also on other odd jobs here and there, but it's fine.
How did you get people to make you passports?
Okay, that's a very good question. In the 1980s, the situation has changed a little bit for the Jews, and the lower, the lower ranking people in government, many in Secret Service, they had some wiggle room to do deals under the table. So with bribery, they were able to help you, obtain. But to a limited extent, they cannot just give passports to everybody. There was a big problem for them. Very good question. Other questions? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I did my pre-med major at YU, Yeshiva University, and then I applied to medical school. I took the MCAT, and the first MCAT was 3 points lower than the accepted level. They wanted really, really high. So I wasted another year to take the MCAT again. And then I got what they asked me to get, and I got accepted into Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And that's how I started. Questions? Can I give him a chance? Go ahead. I am the oldest of 10 kids. We are 5 boys and 5 girls in the family. I came by myself first. I was able to get my sister out, the oldest sister, in 1992. And my entire family came in 1993. Yes, go ahead. Yes. I think for me, it's time for me to move on, but it's not up to me now. I have a family, I have a wife, and I would like to move to Israel. As hard as I've been told, I mean, I've been there many times, but it's hard to live there. But ultimately, this is the home for all the Jews that I believe in. This is the home, regardless of how we feel, where we are here comfortable, one of the greatest countries in the world, I should say, United States. But the home, from my perspective, the real home for a Jew, every Jew, is Israel. Willingly or unwillingly, at one point, we will all be there. Oh, I still have a hard time with it. It's very hard. It's not just the language. The language reflects thinking behind it, the customs, the way of thinking of things. It's a whole psychology. It's very difficult. Until today, sometimes, my wife makes fun of me when I use the idioms incorrectly or in the proper, not in the proper setting. It's very difficult. But a human being is very, very accommodating, and all of us I'm sure all of us have the same capability, and we adapt very fast, but it's difficult. It's very difficult to learn a new language. Somebody else? How did I meet my wife? My wife and I met through a introduction, a mutual friend who introduced us. And 6 months later, we got married. Pretty quick. Oh, go ahead. Excellent question. Okay. Yes, I did go to Jewish schools in Syria, just like you guys. We learned whatever you're learning here too, to some extent. Not the Hebrew language, of course, but Talmud, Mishnayot, religious subjects were allowed to learn. However, living in the Jewish quarter is very different than living in New York. In what sense? Since 1948, and throughout the years, many Jewish families escaped Syria, and they left behind homes and businesses. Many of those homes were taken over by the government, and who did they bring in to live in those homes? Palestinian refugees who came out of Israel in 1948. So I grew up with a mix of neighbors, Jewish neighbors and Palestinian neighbors, and we frequently had a lot of problems, fights as a kid coming from school to my house, going back home. I had, fights. They used to beat us. We used to fight with them. That wasn't very welcoming, let's say, environment. It was a very difficult environment. That on one hand. On the other hand, in high school, although they knew we were Jewish kids sitting next to our non-Jewish kids, Muslims or Christians, we, to some extent, hid our identity to the best of our ability because we didn't want to constantly being harassed, constantly being discriminated, all the time. A Jew or, it was not easy. Here, it's very, very different. I did not appreciate many of the things that we take for granted in the United States until I got here. I did not appreciate that. To be able to freely speak your mind, no way. You can never. All the time as growing up in school or at home, parents and adults would say, be careful what you say. Be careful, don't say this. Someone might be listening, you might be in trouble. So it was very different. It was a very constrained environment compared to the United States, where we had full freedom to practice anything you want and pursue any dream you like. I guess that's it for today. I wish you a happy Hanukkah, and it's been a privilege being here with you. I wish you best of luck. Good. Thank you.
So much. Thank you so much. Wait a minute, I wanted to ask you some questions. Toda rabba rabba. Okay. Thank you so much, KJ Dr. Zalta. It's been so moving and so important for us to hear because especially coming off Thanksgiving and being so grateful for Hanukkah, to really appreciate what we have in here, all of our gifts and our freedoms to be and to practice freely Jewish life, proudly at school and beyond. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Rabbi Laniado, for such an informative and important message and sharing the history and the journey of the Aleppo Jews and of the Syrian Jews. And thank you everyone for being such good listeners and for asking such good questions. Mrs. Bernstein? Thank you.
Very much.
I came in 1996.
Good. Exactly, okay. She's a person of mine too. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful family. His son-in-law was my son-in-law. Yeah, I was just